Everyone, welcome back. Happy belated New Year. It's nice to see everyone here. So many people in person as well.
I am beginning this sitting. Welcome to meeting number 45 of the Permanent Standing Committee on Public Accounts. Pursuant to Standing Order 108.3G, the committee is meeting today as part of its study on Report 10 from the Auditor General of Canada on specific COVID-19 benefits, with a special focus on the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy.
I'd now like to welcome our guests. It's wonderful to see everyone in person today. Office of the Auditor General, Karen Hogan, nice to see you. I think we're going to be seeing you a fair bit, you and your team, the next couple of weeks and months. Melanie Cabana, Principal, hello, nice to see you. José Surprenant, Director, hello. And then from the Canada Revenue Agency, Bob Hamilton, Commissioner of Revenue and Chief Executive Office. Good day. Kathy Hawara, Assistant Commissioner, Compliance Programs Branch. Marc Lemieux, bonjour, Assistant Commissioner, Collections and Verification Branch. Jillian Prank, Assistant Commissioner, Assessment, Benefits and Service Branch. We'll be here from both the Auditor General and the CRA for 5 minutes each. Ms. Hogan, as is routine, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Monsieur le Président, je vous...
Mr. Chair, thank you for this opportunity to discuss our report on specific COVID-19 benefits, which was tabled in the House of Commons on December 6, 2022. I would like to acknowledge that this hearing is taking place on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. Joining me today are Melanie Cabana and José Surprenant, who are responsible for the audit. This audit focused on whether Employment and Social Development Canada and the Canada Revenue Agency managed COVID-19 benefits efficiently and effectively, including whether the COVID-19 programs achieved their objectives and provided value for money outcomes. We also looked at whether benefit payments were accurate, whether they were paid to those who were eligible to receive them, and whether the procedures to recover overpayments and payments made to ineligible recipients were timely. Overall, the department and the agency effectively delivered COVID-19 programs to provide quick financial relief to individuals and employers. This helped prevent an increase in poverty and income inequalities, and helped the economy bounce back. To issue payments quickly, the government decided to limit prepayment controls by relying on information provided by applicants. In doing so, it recognized that post-payment verification work would be needed. We looked at 6 programs and found that overpayments of $4.6 billion were made to ineligible individuals. We also estimated that at least $27.4 billion of payments to individuals and employers should be investigated further because we identified risks that they may not have been eligible for the benefits that they received. However, the number of post-payment verifications that the department and the agency have planned are insufficient. They do not plan to verify payments made to all recipients identified as potentially ineligible.
Request, we will focus on the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy today. We found that the program delivered support to employers in sectors most impacted by the pandemic. However, we could not assess the impact of the program, including whether objectives were met, because employers were required to provide only limited self-declared information in their applications. To carry out our audit work, We used GST HST returns because it was the best information that was available. The agency did not have monthly revenue data for businesses, even though this information is critical based on eligibility criteria for the benefit. By analyzing the GST HST returns filed with the Canada Revenue Agency in 2020 and 2021, we estimated that $15.5 billion in benefits were paid to recipients of the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy who might not have been eligible to receive them. We concluded that all of those payments should be investigated further. I am concerned about the limited progress in post-payment verification work for all the programs we looked at, including the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. The government knew that significant post-payment work would be needed the moment the decision was made to limit prepayment controls. However, neither resources nor plans have been sufficiently adjusted to reflect the unprecedented circumstances brought on by the pandemic. The federal government has spent billions of dollars and does not know whether that money always went to eligible recipients. In the interest of being fair to all taxpayers, the government must carry out rigorous verification work. If it chooses a different approach, then it must be clear and transparent with Canadians. Mr. Chair, this concludes my opening remarks. We would be pleased to answer any questions the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hogan. Mr. Hamilton, you have the floor now for 5 minutes, please. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and we're pleased to be here today to discuss Auditor General of Canada's Report 10 on the specific COVID benefits, with a focus today, COVID-19 benefits, the focus today on the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, or CEWS, as we may refer to it. You've already introduced the 3 Assistant Commissioners that I have joining me today. And first, I would just like to highlight the essential work that the Auditor General does. This isn't the first time we've had the Auditor General come through and examine things that we've done, and it always produces useful insights that we can use, and I thank her and her team. And we are very attentive to the recommendations that come out of it, particularly in something like these emergency benefits, where it was really a first-time thing for everybody, so there's lots of lessons to be learned around it. We also thank the committee for its review of Report 7, CEWS, of the 2021 reports of the Auditor General of Canada, as well as its subsequent recommendations and requests for progress reports. The CRA provided a report on post-payment audits to the committee's attention in December of 2022. In addition, the CRA will provide 2 further progress reports before May 31st, 2023.
When CEWS was first introduced, the urgent priority of the government was to assist the economy in an extremely volatile period at the onset of COVID-19, where both the future of many businesses and the Canadians they employed was in question. The emergency wage subsidy was designed to allow employers to keep workers on their payroll, bring back previously laid-off employees, and help ease their businesses back into normal operations.
Implemented this program within constrained timelines in order to meet urgent financial and economic needs. What's more, the CRA itself is not a policy-making body. It administered the CEWS according to the parameters set by the government and as passed by Parliament in enabling legislation. With respect to Report 10, the CRA accepts the majority of the recommendations and partially accepts one and is working to implement them. This is noted in the CRA's action plan, which has been shared with the committee. At the same time, on one point, the CRA did have some observations surrounding the OAG's estimate of potentially ineligible payments that require further investigation into the CEWS, and the Auditor General has referenced that in her remarks. The results of completed CEWS audits to date suggest that the number of ineligible claims is expected to be significantly lower than initially projected by the Auditor General. By way of background, as is usual in compliance work, the CRA has started its reviews and audits of the highest risk claimants, allowing the CRA to focus on claims that are most likely to be ineligible or overstated. This approach optimizes recoveries and ensures that high-risk claims are addressed while making efficient use of CRA resources. In the audits that the CRA completed as of January 3rd, 2023, 94.2% of the amounts reviewed have been allowed, and the CRA has denied or adjusted 5.8% of the dollar value of these claims. Admittedly, the compliance work is at early stages, but that's our experience on the ground so far. Dans les vérifications réalisées,
Indeed, in the audits to date, the majority of those businesses and employers applied the CEWS rules correctly and made every effort to comply.
it's too early in the compliance cycle of this program to provide concrete numbers on total ineligible claims with a degree of certainty. As noted by the Auditor General, a more definitive estimate of payments to potentially ineligible recipients will only be determined once the comprehensive post-payment audit activities are complete. We will continue to work diligently on its compliance, on our compliance efforts, including addressing the recommendations made by the Auditor General. And before concluding, I just want to take a moment to applaud the tremendous work of the CRA employees during the pandemic. It was an extraordinary time for us at the agency, and these dedicated public servants delivered the COVID-19 programs in a matter of weeks, ensuring Canadians received timely assistance in a period of much uncertainty, and their efforts continue as we focus on our compliance efforts. With that, we thank the committee for the opportunity to appear before you today. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Those are both spot-on presentations in no time. Beginning the first round now, going to Mr. Chambers, you have the floor for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome to our guest today, Mr. Hamilton. It's been about 15 years since we've crossed paths at the Department of Finance, so you've had an impressive career since then. I just wanted to spend a bit of time on this partially accept and the methodology around how the CRA is determining how much amounts need to be investigated. The Auditor General has outlined a methodology that seems to be rather reasonable. On what methodology is the CRA basing its view on how many payments need to be post-payment verified?
Sure, and I'll tackle that. Maybe there's two aspects. I'll just pull them apart a little bit. One is whether we should be going after all places where there could be risk, or whether we take a more risk-based approach. And that's, I think, the question that you're asking. The other is a specific methodology to project what do we think the amounts of the ineligible payments were. I'll leave that aside for future questioning. In terms of the partially disagree, I guess our perspective on it is we take generally, almost exclusively, an approach within the agency to focus on a risk-based assessment. So take a look at the information that we have at our disposal, try to identify where the highest risks are, and go after those, and the highest risk and the potential for recovery, and not cover 100% of people. Now, there is an approach where you could go after 100% and uncover everything, but we do take that risk-based approach, and we amend it as we move forward and as we develop evidence about, well, what worked and what did not work in previous attempts. We adjust our risk parameters, based on business intelligence that we have, maybe leads that we have, or some of the information that we have at our disposal. So I think that's the core of the issue, I think, in terms of the partially disagree, is that we didn't want to commit that we were going to review every claim that came in.
So it's not that you disagree with the $15 billion of wage subsidy that ought to be reviewed. It's that you have limited resources to pursue 100% of what the Auditor General has identified?
No, I wouldn't characterize it as we don't have enough resources. I mean, certainly it would take more resources to go after every single dollar.
So do you agree with the $15 billion, yes or no? Is that the number that you believe?
No, we think that is an overestimate. And again, I would acknowledge we're early in the compliance program, so we don't know for sure where it's going to go. But based on our evidence to date, we see businesses generally complying. Where they have made mistakes, it's been errors because of the complexity of the program or what have you. And we have set some pockets of people that have intentionally misled, and we're pursuing those.
So you're doing an end result. So you'll say, okay, we've done a certain number of post-payment verifications, a certain percentage of those are ineligible, and then you'll extrapolate to say the total number. The Auditor General is saying, okay, we're looking at actual HST, GST returns. Here's the total pool that we think ought to be examined. Is that a fair description of how the CRA is approaching this?
I'm not sure if it's a fair description of how we're approaching it. Let me just say that I think when you refer to the $15.5 billion and using GST, HST, to be fair to the Auditor General, they were trying to come up with an estimate of how much might be out there when there wasn't a lot of information available. So that's more of a projection of what's out there rather than an approach. If we get to the projection, we think that the GST is not actually a very good indicator, that GST data, of who might be ineligible. And we actually have some experience with that. That's the issue of the estimate of the number. But on the approach, ours is more of a risk-based approach.
Can you provide to the committee the methodology that you're using to guesstimate the $15 billion or what you believe to be the amount that ought to be investigated? Is that...
Well, we haven't actually estimated the $15.5 billion. What we have on the ground. We've started audits, we've completed audits, and so we can see what we've come up so far in some of the higher risk cases that we've identified, and we don't think, if you extrapolate that.
So you don't agree with the $15 billion, you think it's less, but you don't know how much it might be?
It's hard to say at this stage, and even the $15.5 billion, I think the Auditor General would agree that's not a
So
point
you can't
estimate.
provide a number that you think is...
I can tell you that it's all about 6% of claims that we have had so far have been either adjusted or denied.
And so we also understand there's a limitation period by which some of these investigations or verifications need to be completed. Are you confident that you're going to be able to complete the ones that you want to within the legislated timeline?
Yes, we're very confident of that. It is true that there are some restrictions after 3 or 4 years, but those don't apply in cases where we see fraud or misleading information. And in terms of collections, once we establish the debt, we have lots of time to collect. So it's conceivable in a certain circumstance you could run out of time, but we're very confident.
Would you have time to investigate the $15 billion?
I'm actually not 100% sure what you're referring to when you say
would
the
you have time? The Auditor
$15.5
General suggests that $15 billion of the wage subsidy ought to be investigated for verification. Would you be able to complete those audits within the legislated timeline?
I would expect, I'd have to turn to my colleague, but if we wanted to, I would expect that we could, because as I've said, if there are issues of fraud or other misappropriated information, then we can extend the time deadline. So we don't face that kind of a 3-year or a 4-year clock for the majority of these cases. But maybe okay.
And that is the time, Mr. Hamilton. Mr. Chambers, you can return to that line of questioning if you like. Turning now to Mr. Fragascatos. Good to see you, sir. You have the floor for 6 minutes.
Good to see you, Chair. Happy New Year to all colleagues, and thank you to all of you for being here today. I'll begin my questions with Ms. Hogan. Ms. Hogan, your report is extensive. There's no question about that. One of the things that stands out in the report, of course, is your point on what would have happened, what potentially would have happened. We can't know with absolute certainty. But what would have happened if the various emergency programs, of which the wage subsidy is one, admittedly a very important part of the overall picture, a signature response program on the part of the government. If these programs were not introduced, you said, as you say in the report, you articulated that again here today, that poverty would have increased very significantly, and the same is true for income inequality. Could you expand on that?
What we looked at was whether or not the programs were meeting some of their stated objectives. And so the ones to support individuals and businesses combined helped to mitigate an increase in poverty. And we also looked at whether people were able to stay home and stay healthier and then allow the economy to bounce back. And so all of the statistical information that we analyzed supported that the subsidies followed the severity of health measures that were there, and so allowed Canadians to stay home and allowed the economy to bounce back. We did identify that there were an income disincentive to potentially go back to work, but we did see the government adjust for that as well.
The former governor of the Bank of Canada, Stephen Poloz, is on record as saying, both in Finance Committee testimony when he appeared there when he was governor, and in subsequent interviews, writings, things of this nature, that had it not been for the emergency programs, Canada would have seen a situation approximating a depression. Are you in a position to comment on that? Would you agree with that? Would you disagree with that?
I think we really analyzed the information that Statistics Canada had available and provided that information. I do believe the governor of the bank is in a better position to talk about inflation and depressions, and so I'll defer to his knowledge on that.
In your report, in fact, you cite Statistics Canada, and you cite that between February and April of 2020, the economy experienced an overall decline of 17% in GDP. And in terms of dollars, that is $350 billion is in terms of a decline for the overall economy. So something quite of a magnitude that we haven't seen, certainly in our lifetimes. Whether or not you disagree or agree, I take your point. And I think a variety of economists and others have said that the situation was quite grave and that the emergency programs played an enormous role in helping Canadians get through. If I could go to the CRA now, and thank you to all of you for being here again, and because we've heard you at this committee before, and thank you, of course, for your service to Canadians during this time. My first question goes to Mr. Hamilton. The types of businesses, Mr. Hamilton, that we're talking about mom and pop businesses, we're talking about small businesses. I hesitate to speak for the entire committee, but I think all of us have small businesses in our communities that really look to the wage subsidy as something that did help them get over to the other side, if I can put it that way. Are these the sorts of businesses that partook?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would say if you look at the businesses that benefited from the wage subsidy, you get a very broad cross-section of size of businesses in the economy.
Okay.
And I think the Auditor General, if I recall correct, in the report has a table that shows by size of business. And certainly in number, a lot are small businesses, as you've referred to, that are out there. And certainly we take that into account in our compliance efforts as we sort out, what we need to do and when. But there are big businesses in there as well, multinationals. So it's the spectrum. And some of the bigger value amounts are in the bigger businesses, but a lot of the numbers are in the small businesses.
Well, no, we've heard from, especially heard from restaurant owners in London, Ontario, about how valuable, how important the wage subsidy was. I'm low on time, so I will ask you, because I think it's important to understand the policy design here. You talked about the wage subsidy. You talked about the verification system that, in fact, was in place. That was set in place to ensure that eligibility was met. Can you talk about that? Because sometimes there could be a perception out there that there wasn't a verification system with respect to the wage subsidy.
Yes, thanks for the question. And if your time is short, so is mine. So let me just try to give you a very quick answer.
There is a minute, so you can,
Okay. Yeah. Perfect. Yeah, because sometimes we don't talk about that as much. There were prepayment controls, particularly on the wage subsidy, where we took a look. I think we examined 100% of the applications automatically, and then put some aside and said, well, we're going to take a closer look at these ones if the people in the agency, based on whatever knowledge we had, said something doesn't look quite right here, let's look at it more in depth, and we would either let it go through or we would hold it up. So there were those prepayment controls that were used to try to control the money from going out in the first place. But I think, as indicated, we were operating in a very time-pressed environment, so maybe there wasn't as many prepayment controls as we might have in the regular income tax system, say. And so we have compensated for that by having a little bit more on the post-payment controls. But there definitely were certainly more than with the prepayment controls before businesses got the money.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Maintenant, la députée.
Now, MP Saint-Clair Desgagnés, you have 6 minutes. Thank you, Chair. Hello, colleagues from FAR. First of all, I'd like to wish Happy New Year to the Auditor General and her team. I'd like to provide some context for today's meeting. When the Auditor General's report was published, there were comments from the Minister for National Revenue that sort of claimed that the figures weren't entirely factual. The figures provided by the Auditor General of Canada, that is. I'd like to simply read very quickly what was said in the House of Commons. Mr. Speaker, the House does not agree with the number of ineligible applicants for CEWS. The CRA believes that the Auditor General's figures are exaggerated. It's not her fault. We know that she was forced by the opposition or received pressure from the opposition to publish her report. What I would like, unquote, what I'd like to do is provide this context as to admissibility. And we know that the government is able to put a number to eligibilities and non-eligibilities. This was done elsewhere in the world. It's also possible to estimate the number of people who should not have received payments. I think it's absolutely incredible that in Canada we have two versions of the numbers. There should not be any wiggle room. These are numbers. How then do you explain that there is no response, that in January 2023 we still don't know how many individuals and employers received the payment and should not have? Answer. First of all, I'd like to answer your question and say that I found the minister's comments disappointing. I had been asked to perform an audit on the benefits by a clause that was in a law voted or passed by the House of Commons and the Senate. I was required to do the audit that we're discussing today. As for your specific question, it was because of the decision to limit the information requested by the employers and individuals in their applications and the lack of time that it was for these reasons that we formulated two recommendations. That is, that the government implement a system where we could have information in real time on business revenue. As you mentioned, other countries have this type of system, and they have more information on payments made to ineligible applicants for this reason. Question. What are other countries doing to recover the money? Have they used greater means to be able to recover this? Answer. I'll admit that during our audit, we didn't examine what other countries are doing to recover these monies. However, we know that many countries have information in real time, and that allowed them to limit payments to ineligible applicants, businesses or individuals, and it also allowed them to quickly spot erroneous payments. How much time do I still have, Chair? 2 minutes. Thank you. My next questions are for the Canadian Revenue Agency. Mr. Hamilton, it seems that the problem here is that a good portion of public money went to overpayments. We understand that this would be not unexpected in such a situation as the pandemic. However, what is problematic is that we can't estimate the number of businesses and individuals who received this money erroneously and how much money that was. There also seemed to be a lack of means to recover this money. For example, in other countries, a special commission position was created exactly to recover this money. How is it then that we are unable to put a figure on the amount of money that was overpaid? Answer. Chair, I will respond to some of the questions and perhaps ask my colleagues to help.
Come on,
It's impossible to estimate the amount of money right now, mainly because we're still too early in the verification process. We will continue to analyze taxpayers' information according to our risk model, but it's too early to estimate the amount of money overpaid. We don't have this estimate because it's too early, but we do have experience. And it's a bit early, but we do have experience about, we're able to say that about 6% of businesses or individuals received money but were not eligible. And we were required to adjust the amounts for these people. Mr. Hamilton, I'm sorry, your time is up. Perhaps we'll come back to this question later. I'll turn now to Mr. Desjarlais. You have 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank all the witnesses for being present for your statements today. I do want to begin by acknowledging the tremendous human suffering that's largely taken place throughout the pandemic. I know people in my community and right across the country, from coast to coast to coast, have had to deal with this and had to deal with the huge debt loads that they've been taking on from the lack of assistance from other levels of government. But I am very pleased to see in many ways that this benefit, the Canadian Emergency Wage Subsidy and other benefits for COVID-19, were able to actually help people. I meet some of these people every single day, and the audit suggests that it was a good thing. And so I know that on behalf of Canadians, this was a very good thing to do, particularly for our economy as it bounces back. But of course, the work of making sure that we continue to ensure that there's accountability is the process that we're all here for today, and one that I share. I do want to also recognize that folks, particularly within the Canadian Revenue Agency, the regular everyday workers, the folks who are doing the work to making sure that these benefits were provided to Canadians, were there. When asked for assistance during one of our country's greatest times of need, the CRA did in fact do its job and did it well. I do want to recognize that before I get into some of these questions. I also want to recognize that the Auditor General clearly demonstrated in her audit that the programs that were offered, the Canadian Emergency Wage Subsidy and others like the Canadian Emergency, the CERB, were really helpful for our economy. And so I want to keep that context in mind while talking specifically about work that we need to do to make sure that there is further accountability for those who may have taken funds and may not have needed it. I do, in particular, want to recognize the audit in many aspects was accepted by the CRA. One area that was not accepted by the CRA and was talked about by previous members of this committee was the conversation of capacity. Capacity, of course, is limited. The CRA does not have infinite resources, does not have an ability to do everything that could be demanded of in this scope. So I want to recognize that is a real limit to this. But I also want to recognize that the CRA has a job to do, in the sense that not only does it have to do the work of making sure that there is in fact a risk-based approach in the analysis of recovery of these funds, but also that there is work to be done in making sure that those who are actually going to be doing this work are best supported. It's no question that the public service has in fact taken on far greater responsibility than we'd ever asked them to do. The pandemic forced every single one of us to step up, including and especially our public service, to make sure that they had the ability to do the things that Canadians need them in one of our greatest times of need. It's the hardworking civil service workers, their skill and dedication to delivering this relief is the reason why Canadians got it. They provided critical support through a time when many folks, many folks couldn't find support elsewhere. The audit shows that Canadians, in fact, owe a great debt to the workers and the everyday folks of CRA. But now, more than ever, we need these workers to be respected. 35,000 employees at the CRA are not getting that from their employer. We're hearing it time and time again, and I'm concerned about this. I'm concerned that the CRA's capacity could be even further limited in the investigation of this work, in particular to the workers' conditions. The workers at the CRA have had no contract for over a year now, and I can't anticipate how we can actually find ways to make recommendations in this audit without giving great consideration for the fact that our civil service is in desperate need of attention. The CRA is being presented with shockingly low salary offers currently right now, and I can't foresee in the next little while how we're going to actually make sure that our civil service in the CRA is able to do the work of the Auditor General and the recommendations there within. So I do recognize that the CRAs recognize that in their lack of acceptance of that recommendation in full. And so I'd like to ask Commissioner Hamilton to please recognize that fact. Recognize that members of our national parliament, myself included, are concerned about our civil service. They are concerned about its stability and are concerned about whether or not the CRA will in fact have the future resources to do the job that we're going to be asking them to do. And so I think that's an important and very worthwhile aspect to mention when we're talking about the recovery of these huge funds. We just heard that the Auditor General mentioned $15.5 billion in the Canadian emergency wage subsidy payments that our office demands further scrutiny from the Canadian Revenue Agency. That is a massive task, and one that will require the great cooperation of management and labor to actually ensure that we have those outcomes, an outcome that I share with many folks, including the Auditor General. While I have no doubt that the CRA's auditors have incredible skills and perseverance in this work, I am concerned that the government isn't going to give the CRA and its workers the tools they actually need to do the work that Canadians need them to do. The CRA, like I mentioned before, does not have unlimited resources. We must consider this as parliamentarians and members of this committee. Recent reports from the CRA itself show extremely large amounts of uncollected taxes, already an existing capacity issue. A 2021 report that estimated that the years between 2014 and 2018 estimated uncollected corporate tax revenue at between $4.6 and $7.3 billion a year. Commissioner, these are shocking numbers. The overwhelming majority of this is in relation to large-scale corporations. This was even before the unprecedented strain of the pandemic that was placed on the CRA in terms of workload, let alone the implications of verifying these payments after the fact that the CRA's capacity has been limited. So my question to the CRA Commissioner.
And Mr. Desjardins, I'll cut you off right there because there's no time for a response, but you'll have another round shortly. But thank you very, very much. Turning now again to Mr. Chambers, you have the floor for 5 minutes this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner, the Auditor General's identified, let's say we, just take some assumptions as she's identified about $27 billion or say $32 billion. We'll call that a potential error rate. You may not agree with the number, but that's a potential error rate of ineligible payments. That's about 15% of the total COVID payments from wage subsidy and CERB. When the government made the decision to proceed with an attestation-based process by which to distribute benefits, were there any estimations made by the CRA about what error rate might exist by using, I'll call a riskier process to distribute benefits?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would certainly say there was a recognition that in going into an attestation-based approach, you were adding additional risks into the system, and that was a decision that the government and others felt was a good balance, that we needed to get the money out. But so there was definitely a recognition that this would require more compliance efforts down the road after we paid. I would say that particularly for the CERB. Also for the queues, but we felt like we had an opportunity to get a little bit more prepayment control into the queues. I'm not aware of any estimate that we produced. We probably, had we done one, and I could check, it probably would have been based a little bit on experience that we have, because we have a lot of experience with the income tax system, GST and others, and you would just have to augment that a little bit. But nobody knew quite how the pandemic was going to unfold, how many benefits were going to be there. So I'm not aware of an estimate.
So
I can
would-
certainly check.
So would you classify, though, a 15% error rate as something, that deserves additional scrutiny?
15%, if you looked at a program and said you're going to put out 15% of the money to ineligible people, that would be high.
That would be high. So the Auditor General also produced an interim report about benefits and made some recommendations. Members of opposition parties, multiple opposition parties also raised some concerns about, potential for ineligible recipients, lots of stories about, those in prison, et cetera. Did you produce another estimate of what might be an acceptable error rate or what you think it might be when the Auditor General released an interim report? I'm just trying to understand what the discussions were in the department and how political decisions made to continue with a process that's obviously very or more risky than otherwise.
Mr. Chair, I think you have to recognize that as the pandemic went on, there were adjustments made to the program, to the compliance program, and different controls brought into place to try to make sure that we learned from what was going on and we put more controls in place to limit the amount of money that went out. The other thing, the Auditor General had mentioned the GST data earlier on as being something to look at. We actually tried that in the rent subsidy that we did and found it wasn't a very good indicator for that one, and that has some similarities with the Qs. So yes, we were trying where we could to introduce new controls or change methods on the fly as the pandemic evolved and benefits got extended, new benefits came in. I would just say on your point, though, when I look around internationally, and I'm the chair of a forum of tax administrators, all my colleagues around the world, I think you'd find a lot of similar experiences with this kind of trying to get money out the door fairly quickly, and everybody is dealing with the same reality.
Just quickly, because I have 1 minute left, and I have a very quick question for you. Are you able to provide to the committee how many payments you did stop with the prepayment controls for the wage subsidy? Is that something you could follow up with?
I would
A yes, no?
perhaps turn to my colleague. They might have it here. If not,
Just
we'll
a
have
yes,
to
no
get
is
back
okay.
to
I
you.
don't need the number now. Is that?
Have it?
Okay, thank you.
We have it if you want it.
I'll take that
We'll get
in
it-
writing.
we'll get it in
Thank
writing.
you.
Thank you.
Auditor,
So that, just one, so that will be submitted. Thank you.
Auditor General, just briefly, I have about 30 seconds left. We all recognize that the attestation base was required in the time. It's a time of crisis. We're past that now. Are you concerned that we're continuing to rely on an attestation-based approach to deliver rent subsidies and dental subsidies in a time of not crisis?
And a very short reply, and if you have more to say, we'll have to come back to you, but if you could keep it short, please.
Quickly. So I think I mentioned in our first reports back in 2021 that we recognize that the limitation of prepayment controls is a best practice in the time of crisis. But I agree that even as the pandemic continued to go, and now that the pandemic is sort of on the back end, that a different approach is likely needed. I would have liked to have seen more rigor put into some of the prepayment controls, especially around key eligibility criteria like revenues.
Thank you, Ms. Hogan. Appreciate it. Ms. Shanahan.
Yes. Thank you.
You have the floor.
Chair, and I thank all the witnesses that are here with us today, Auditor General, Mr. Hamilton, your teams, and I wish everyone a Happy New Year around the table as well. It was quite something to be back in my riding these last few weeks during the Christmas period because it almost felt like normal. Stores were open, restaurants were open, we were able to entertain, we were able to visit salon de coiffure and
Hairdresser?
manicure places, boutiques, and so on and so forth. And I'm struck by the fact that you mentioned in your report, Auditor General, that the individuals from groups that were most impacted by the pandemic, low-income persons, women, visible minorities, youth, did benefit from the programs at a much higher degree. And I know we're talking about businesses here today, and the businesses that I've mentioned, restaurants and hairdressing establishments and boutiques and so on, largely would be owned and operated by exactly those vulnerable groups, and they were very pleased to be opened again. My concern back in March, April of 2020 was that it would be difficult for these groups to access programs, and I was one of the people advocating for the minimal of sort of red tape, if you will. I know that's a favorite term with my Conservative colleagues. Eliminate the red tape, that those programs would be more accessible. So, Auditor General, there were, though, some prepayment verification that was applied, as is prudent in any program going out to businesses. Do you believe that the government made the correct choice in the type of prepayment verifications that were made for the wage subsidy program? And do you think that these verifications helped overall compliance?
So I'll keep my comments to looking at the Canada Wage Subsidy Program, which was a business one, versus the individual one, given the focus of the hearing today. So there were prepayment controls for some of the wage subsidies. There was a check that business had an active payroll account or an active business account. So there was some automated and some manual prepayment controls. And I acknowledge that, in line with the members' comments about limiting it at the beginning of the pandemic, when there was a lot of uncertainty and chaos, but that needed to get adjusted, in my view, as the pandemic continued. And there were opportunities as the program was extended and that businesses were open and a little more able to operate, to bring in some controls. The control I would have liked to have seen is one around revenues. That is the main eligibility criteria in the wage subsidy program, and that was based solely on attestations. And with limited information on monthly revenue information for businesses, it requires a very rigorous post-payment approach, because there is no other way to verify eligibility than doing those post-payment audits.
Well, I thank you for that answer, and I did hear your answer to a previous colleague's question referring to the fact that other countries have real-time data. That would represent a significant investment, but it's one that personally, as a former tax practitioner, I would certainly look forward to as well. I'd like to turn now to Commissioner Hamilton, and I wanted to thank you for the work that the CRA performed in this regard, because we don't typically think of the Canada Revenue Agency as being a service agency, right? But certainly, I think that there was a lot of care, from what I could see in the casework that we were involved in helping our business owners access the program. You have provided some progress reports to this committee in regards to previous questions. Can you please go over that, put that on the record here for the committee, to go over those comprehensive verification steps that recipients did undergo?
Thank you, Chair.
And I'll need a briefish response, please.
Briefish, okay. First off, just in terms of the prepayment controls on the wage subsidy, yes, we did have some. Could it have possibly been more? Sure. But it was what it was, and we did try to adjust them as time went on. The other thing we did at the beginning to try to make it more accessible is we had a lot of outreach with businesses, CFIB, others, and we actually produced a calculator that said, here's how you calculate it, because it's a complex program. So that was on the prepayment side. I do take your point and the point of the Auditor General. An e-payroll system or a real-time payroll system or invoicing system would be advantageous. We're doing work on both of those, very significant work on the e-payroll side, and I know that a couple of countries who sit around the global table I'm on found it to be helpful. So that is a recommendation that we do agree with, and actually we're quite far along on the e-payroll side, but it's a big system. On our progress report,
we're going to have to come back to that next
Sure.
bit. So thank you. Next follow-up, Madame St. Clair.
Ms. Saint-Clair Desgagnés, you have 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Chair. I'd like to continue my questioning to Mr. Hamilton. However, there's something you mentioned that made me wonder. You said that you were too early in the process to estimate the amounts of the overpayments. Is it not too late? Isn't it a little too little, rather too late? If we look at other countries, and you know this if you are chairing an international committee, other countries are more advanced. Why? Because they got started earlier and dedicated more resources. Why is it that we are so late? You began only in July 2022, is that right? First of all, I don't agree that we are too late. Is there a problem? I don't completely agree with the idea that we are too late and later than other countries in the world. It's true that it's very early in the process. We're going to continue our audit and verification processes until 2025. That's a long time to carry out these verification processes. That's why I say it's too early to estimate the final amount of overpayments. Importantly, my second point, currently there are sensitivities in the economy. Businesses are more vulnerable because of the pandemic. And in our verification efforts, we're taking this into account. We're trying to provide services businesses and individuals have had difficulties, and that's why we've had to slow down somewhat the process. But I'm very, very confident that we will be able to complete it. It's not a question of resources. It's a question of working on very complex cases. Thank you. Your time is up once again. Mr. Desjarlais.
Please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And just back to Mr. Hamilton, in regards to my previous statement, if we were to follow on through with the Auditor General's recommendations and ensure that all of the $15.5 billion was further investigated by the CRA's auditors, would it jeopardize the CRA's ability to address other long-standing issues, such as the tax gap due to corporate evasion?
Mr. Chair, I would say there's obviously an opportunity cost to everything. If you do more of one thing, you're going to have to do less of another. But I don't characterize this as an issue of resources from the CRA perspective. We were given the resources to carry out a compliance program consistent with what you would see in international best practices. And again, just a bit of confusion around the 15.5. That's an estimate of what might be out there, potentially, based on GST monthly data from the pandemic. I'm just not sure that it's worthwhile investigating all of those, because when we have looked at the GST monthly data, we find it's not a great indicator of whether somebody's eligible for the Qs or not. So there's obviously some overlap, but we don't find it's a great indicator. So if we were to go down that route and probe into all of those 15.5 cases, then yes, and that itself is an extrapolation off a small sample, that would take more effort. And in my view, based on what we've seen so far, it wouldn't be worth the effort based on, as I say, we have found some cases where, particularly in the promoter space, where there were people that were misrepresenting or committing fraud, and we're going after those people. But for the vast majority of people, we're finding it's more within the realm of what you might expect, particularly some of the prepayment controls we had, as well as some of the education we did in helping people fill out their forms. So, yeah, everything has an opportunity cost, but I just think at this stage, it wouldn't be worth it based on what we have seen so far.
In terms of just the adequacy of support or resources that's required for the CRA, given the fact that you mentioned the opportunity costs, are you being given adequate levels of funding to actually carry out these tasks and to actually continue to do the work of investigating existing corporate tax evasion?
And a brief answer, Mr. Hamilton, please.
Yes, I would say that we are being given. I mean, I would always say with more resources you could do more, and you referenced the uncollected debt numbers. So there's always more things we could do if we had more resources, but I think in this context right here, I think we were resourced appropriately for the task.
Thank you very much.
That may change as we see more things.
Thank you very much.
Can do our work, but
Hedging your bets. Thank you very much. Good. Turning now to Mr. McCauley. You have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Witnesses, thanks for being with us today. Ms. Hogan and team, welcome back. Ms. Hogan, you mentioned in your opening statement, you noted your concern on CRA's limited progress in post-payment verification, despite the government knowing the importance of it because of the limited controls. State plans and resources haven't been adjusted to reflect the importance. Now, we've looked, it's over $100 billion into, some of it went to very wealthy, very profitable foreign companies, foreign-controlled multinationals. Some went to China state-owned companies, China state-owned banks. And as I mentioned, it's $100 billion. Like, what more should the CRA be doing? We mentioned that there's limited progress in the verification. What should they be doing to protect taxpayers?
Well, what we were looking for was that there would have been perhaps an earlier start or more resources devoted to doing more work. Because if we look at a typical program that the government has, and I'll use, for example, the Employment Insurance Program, there's very rigorous vetting of an application before an individual receives benefits. There is still some post-payment work done even after all of that rigorous prepayment verification. In this instance, there was very limited prepayment controls with the intention of doing rigorous post-payment work. In our view, that should be more than you would typically do on a program. Here we identified with the monthly GST filers who received about 64% of the wage subsidy, that there were some risks that it required further investigation. And the only way you can find out whether or not a business is eligible would be to do that post-payment work, because there is no other information to verify eligibility.
Mr. Hamilton, considering what the AG has stated, and we've seen, I think in one report, 27 billion, 15 billion, do you not think that is a large enough number to further investigate based on the GST numbers? Like, I'm just aghast. Like, we've all experienced CRA, and let's be honest, Canadians don't view it as a service. We've experienced, as MPs, CRA going after small businesses for tiny amounts. We've seen them go after regular Canadians. Like, this is a huge amount of potential money. Like, who at the CRA is making the decision that, you know, we're willing to risk writing off 15, 20, $25 billion of taxpayers' money?
Mr. Chair, first I would say we are trying to change people's impressions of the CRA as being a bit more service-oriented, but that's a journey. On the issue of would we be worried about it? I think we are doing the work that's necessary to uncover where there are risks and where there is money
what if you're
that went
wrong?
to ineligible people.
But what if you're wrong?
And I maybe would ask my colleagues to expand on it, but we have filed a progress report with the committee. We're examining as we go what we see and what does it tell us through our business intelligence and other models,
So
where
you're-
we need to look next
Okay,
and where
let
we
me-
need to
let me
look
just
after
interrupt.
that.
So you're
and I think that
sorry, let me
I'm
interrupt, Mr.
confident that
Hamilton.
we're going to
Just the CRA's position then, it's comfortable dismissing, for lack of better, politer words, the AG's concerns about, you know, $15, $20 billion of money that should be clawed back for taxpayers.
Mr. Chair, I wouldn't interpret it that way at all. I think we're actually moving towards the same goal. We both want to have effective compliance to ensure that Canadians have a fair tax system or benefit system at their disposal. I think that where we might differ is how valuable is that monthly GST data, and then going to the 15.5 in determining our
Thanks, Mr.
compliance
Hamilton.
efforts.
Who decided to set it up as an attestation for this use? Was that finance? Who made the final decision? And it can't be a group decision. It's someone would have to make the decision. You mentioned earlier that I think you would have liked a bit stronger controls. Who made the final decision to set it up as it was?
Well, I think it was the government's decision, and was set out, in the
Did
legislation
the
that was set
CRA
forward.
put forward recommendations of a different way to set up stronger fencing around it to protect Canadian taxpayers?
Mr. Chair, we would have identified.
CRA was part of the consultation. Did you recommend stronger fencing?
Here, Mr. McCauley, why don't we allow him to answer because the time's almost done. Go ahead, Mr. Hamilton.
Yeah, we were definitely part of the conversations around that. I'm not going to talk about who said what and who didn't say what in that conversation, but
I think it's
the
important.
risks
Did the
were.
CRA recommend stronger
Mr. McCauley,
fencing?
I'd like to, your time is done, so you can come back. You have another round. I'd like to hear from Mr. Hamilton, then I want to go to the Ms. Yip. Please finish up, sir.
I think as you're sitting around that table, you would always expect the administrator to try to make it as tight as possible.
So you did.
So you would expect that. But we're all human beings, and we all understand the situation that was in and needed to get the money out, and we felt like it was an appropriate balancing. And that's really the key in this thing is balancing.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And pardon me, I misspoke. It's Mr. Dong who's next. Pardon me, Mr. Dong, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Chair, and Happy New Year. I want to say Happy New Year to Auditor General and all the public servants from CRA. And I also want to share with you that, during the New Year, I held my New Year levy. There were small local small business people coming from Bayview Village, from Fairview Mall in my district. They want me to extend a sincere thank you to CRA. Your program, various subsidy programs, including the emergency wage subsidy program, really helped them to get through the pandemic. And if it wasn't for that, they told me in their own words, they would have folded their business and they will probably move on to work for somebody else instead of being an employer creating jobs in my riding. So thank you very much on that. I know that you have to come in and answer a lot of tough questions at this committee, but also I want to take this opportunity to ask you to pass on those gratitudes to folks in your department. Thank you. My first question is to Ms. Cassie Carrara. Could you explain to the committee how CRA, or whether or not CRA, experimented with the GST HST revenue model, and did it work or did not work? Could you explain that to us?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. I'm happy to expand on that. One of the recommendations the Auditor General made to us in her first report regarding the wage subsidy was to look at other data sources, including, in particular, the GST data. And what we did is we incorporated the GST data as a prepayment verification control in the context of the rent subsidy, the Canada Emergency Rent Subsidy. And what we found is that it identified a high number of claims that appeared to be ineligible, that appeared not to meet the revenue drop criteria. But upon manual review of those claims, what we found is that, in fact, they were eligible. So we concluded that on its own, the GST data was not a good indicator of ineligibility. And because we were trying to strike a balance between protecting the integrity of the programs and delivering the funding that was urgently needed, the decision was made not to incorporate the GST data as a prepayment control in the context of the wage subsidy. However, I think it is important to be clear the GST data is an important risk indicator, and we do use it in the context of our post-payment risk assessment, but not on its own. We consider it alongside other data sources in order to identify risk and build our audit plans as a result.
Thank you. I was listening to my opposition or conservative colleagues' question. I just want to ask you also, on November 4th, the Conservative Party of Canada passed the Opposition Day motion calling on CRA to delay its CEWS post-payment audits. And how did CRA respond to that motion? Of course, that motion was passed, but it's non-binding. So how did the CRA respond to that motion?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair.
For Mr. Hamilton.
For Mr. Apologies.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we do remember that. Actually, as part of the wage subsidy, we started the audits quite early with a pilot project in 2020. And there was some pushback on that. We carried on with it because we thought even though it was early, it would give us some information that we could use down the road, as Kathy said, to build into our audit plan as we go forward. So we basically carried on with that. That was what we call phase one, pilot project. And then we're now into phase two and have a number of audits underway. And Kathy was just mentioning to me in the context of earlier conversations that we have almost $15 billion under audit right now. So it's not, again, to the question, are we ignoring it? No, we have a lot that's under audit right now, but we did take that phased approach that started in 2020, as you mentioned.
Okay, and to Auditor General, you at the House of Commons Finance Committee on December 13th, 2021, you stated that you confirmed that stopping audit would be a bad idea. I want you to kind of tell us, had CRA followed the motion that was passed, that was proposed and passed in the House and by the Conservatives, what would happen to the overall integrity of the program, whether or not it would seriously damage the reputation of CRA in terms of accountability when it comes to these payments?
Thank you, Mr. Dong. A brief response, Ms. Hogan.
I mean, it's very difficult for me to speculate what would have happened if someone had not done work that they set out to do. What I would offer up is that needing to do post-payment verification work was essential when you have limited prepayment controls. The clock is ticking on when you can do that, right? There's a limitation. So the sooner you get to high-risk files, the better. I think the last point I'd offer up there is, we do have a table in our appendix, and I would point members to 10F.7, where we do analyze CRA's second phase of results. And while dollar values might be low, it does point to the fact that almost 2 out of 3 files have an issue. And when you're doing some sampling, whether it be risk-based or not, that's an indicator that you need to do more work.
Thank you.
And that's why more work is needed.
Thank you very much. Mr. McCauley, you have the floor now for 5 minutes.
Great. Thanks, Chair. Mr. Hamilton, I just want to get back to you. Whose final decision will it be then to pursue the path that you've stated you're taking on the audits? Is that CRA decision?
The decision to, excuse me, Mr. Chair, the decision to carry on with the plan that we have?
As opposed to what the AG has recommended? Is that purely the CRA's decision?
I would say it's largely the CRA's decision. I suppose somebody else within government could come to a different view and tell us not to do anything. But I think in this domain, we largely decide.
Great. At any point during the program, did the CRA, because there were updates to how the program was extended, changed, did the CRA come back then and say, okay, we've had time, it's been 2 months in, 3 months in, let's seriously up the fencing for the wage subsidy?
Mr. Chair, I don't recall us doing that with the wage subsidy, I'll have to say, because, again, we felt relatively comfortable that, given the circumstances, we had some prepayment checks that were kicking out a lot of claims before we made the payments. So we felt that we had a pretty good system in place. It wasn't done, if I contrast it with the CERB, where we had less prepayment controls. So I don't recall ever saying that. I do recall us, talking about, so how are we going to do the post-payment verifications, and what's going to be the time frame for that, and how do we, as the Auditor General said, if you see areas that need more work, then we will do that work. And how
I don't want to put words in the mouth. It sounds like the CRA's was looking at it and saying, well, this is not an issue. I think they're just very low bars to access a subsidy, an attestation program that's not really based on a lot of proof of dropped revenues, et cetera, or, payroll numbers. But so the CRA was just comfortable with that?
Mr. Chair, I would say that there's a lot of space between being comfortable, thinking you have a good plan, and not caring, not worrying about it. So we cared. We worry about this. At the CRA, we have the dual responsibility to not only deliver benefits, but a big responsibility to enforce compliance so that it's a fair tax system.
Is there any discussion about using SIN numbers as been suggested by the AG? Like, is there a chance that perhaps, like we've seen, state-owned China state-owned companies receiving a subsidy, could we have been giving money to subsidies to non-Canadians on payrolls? We saw other issues of dead people receiving CERB, people outside the country. Is that an opportunity? Like, why didn't we use this social insurance numbers?
Mr. Chair, at the beginning, we thought about whether we could use the social insurance numbers. A few problems with that, and the reasons why we didn't. It would have taken a lot longer to develop, do the systems development that we would have needed to do to incorporate those. It would have had a burden on employers to provide those. And so we didn't do it out of the get because it was going to take too long and it was going to delay the program. And then you also have to recognize, once you have a program in place, to come in with different measures can be complicating at that stage. So even if you thought you might want to do something, it's once you've got it in place and it's running, and if you're largely comfortable that you'll be able to deal with it.
There was a fair amount of subsidies to companies that ended up insolvent, but were long in arrears of HST, GST remittances or other remittances to the government. Was there discussion or red flags raised by the CRA, knowing these are strong indicators of eventual insolvency, that we're subsidizing people who owe the government significant amounts of money?
Mr. Chair, well, we certainly take account of what we observe and factor that in. So, where's the risk? Would that company be a particularly high risk, potentially? But I do want to make sure that we don't confuse administrative issues with policy issues, because you can get both in here of people that might think from a policy perspective a company should not have been eligible. We administer the legislation as it's drafted, and if it's permitted.
I realize that you're implementing the policy. Did you recommend to the policymakers, we shouldn't extend the subsidy to companies that look like they are in insolvency? I think it was the AG report. There was $4 billion as of last year was owed by subsidy recipients to the government of Canada, but still had subsidies. Like, was the recommendation when this program was being developed, hey, no, let's not subsidize companies that owe the government billions of dollars? And therefore,
I'm going to cut it off there. Mr. McCall, you have another round, and you can come back to this question, but I do want to make sure we get another full round in, so I have to be a little more judicious with the time. Turning now to Ms. Yip, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. Like many of my colleagues who have also expressed thankfulness for their small businesses and their ridings, the small businesses in my riding are very grateful too. And I'd like to just acknowledge the Auditor General's comments about how quickly the government has issued this program, and how grateful the small businesses are that the CRA was able to roll out the supports. Mr. Hamilton, how comprehensive or vigorous do you feel the CHOOSE compliance program is? Is it effective enough to collect on the remaining outstanding amounts?
Mr. Chair, I think, as I've indicated, we feel comfortable with the compliance program and that we will be able to get deliver to Canadians an effective compliance program that in a risk-based method gets money back from people who didn't deserve it. And I would say that ranges from, as I mentioned, people who are promoters, promoting schemes that we know that we're just trying to word around the system. We need to focus on those, as well as people that just might have made mistakes. You know, a complex program. I've got a complex business, so we feel, you know, again with more time, more resources, maybe one could do even more in that space. But we feel like the balance is pretty good right now in terms of what we had in prepayment, our plan to go into post-payment. I think in an ideal world, we might have been able to get a quicker start on the compliance just from a CRA perspective, but there was a recognition that at that time we had to be sensitive in terms of how we went in and verified businesses and individuals, just given the fragile state of fragile financial state of some of those individuals and businesses. So that played into it as well. And I think there was a reference that earlier we're going to run out of time. We're not going to run out of time for the reasons I've said, but it is true that the longer you wait, the harder it can be sometimes to collect a debt or what have you. So, you know, from our perspective, we might have preferred to be in earlier and be a bit more advanced than we are now, but we think we have the time to assess the risks, go after the places that we think are the highest risk. And as I said, we've got about $15 billion under audit right now. So, you know, we're looking at a lot of money out there and testing it to make sure that it was eligible, the people were eligible for it, or the organizations were eligible for it. So, yeah, I don't have a degree of discomfort on where we are and where we're going. But I think, you know, the Auditor General makes some good points about there are risks out there. There's a program that went out quickly. We put some prepayment controls in, but I think there's always an opportunity to look back and learn some lessons about what we might have done a bit better on the prepayment side. We think we're still learning on the compliance side. We're picking up some lessons as we look at companies and assess them, things we can do to improve our audit plan. But beyond that, I think we're feeling pretty good that we're doing a good job on behalf of Canadians of striking that balance.
Thank you. Ms. Prank, could you go into more detail about the risk-based model to determine who gets audited and who doesn't at this stage? And in particular, I'm curious about how you calibrate that risk and how you adapt your metrics as the audits progress.
I think that question might be directed at me, if that's all right, Mr. Chair. So thank you for the question. Our approach when we establish our compliance programs and our audit plans is always to take a risk-based approach. We have a variety, and the purpose of the risk-based approach is to ensure that we are identifying the highest risk cases so that we can deploy our resources there first. We have access to a number of data sources or business intelligence, and our job is to deploy a variety of tools that we have available to us, our business intelligence tools, to look at that data, analyze the data, and identify cases where we believe there's non-compliance. So some of the things we might look at are tax filings from the claimants, their payroll data as it is updated. We might look at claim periods, different claim over the course of time. What are we seeing trends in terms of the amounts that are being reported as revenue drop from one claim to another, et cetera, all with the view of identifying cases that are risky and that should be audited. And so that's the approach we take. And as the Commissioner mentioned, that approach allows for evolving our understanding of the risk and adjusting our plans as we see the need emerge, so we can expand our focus in some areas, reduce our focus in other areas, so that we are always targeting the highest risk files.
And thank you very much. That is the time. Madame Sinclair Desgagnés.
Ms. Sinclair Gagné, you have 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Chair. For the Auditor General, could you briefly confirm or draw the principal conclusions of your report? I think that's important. You mentioned that a lot of money, $27 billion, needs to be verified for overpayments, at least with regard to eligibility. You've also said that at the current rate, the CRA will not manage to recover all overpayments, and there may be a lack of rigor and even a lack of data that would allow them to. Have I understood properly? Answer. In the interest of time, yes, you identified the failings that we did. Question. How is it possible, when we were listening to Mr. Hamilton, say that it's not so bad, that everything's going well, that there's still time to pursue the process? You are completely he's completely contradicting the Auditor General's conclusions. Let's put things in context. There is a lack of rigor, and that seems to be not at all what you're describing today. Mr. Hamilton? Answer. Sorry, I thought the question was for the Auditor General. I don't think there's a lack of rigor. The program is a very intensive one. The one for the wage subsidy. As my colleague said, this is an effort of identifying risks, focusing on the highest risk cases. But there's not a lack of rigor. There are various programs, the wage subsidy, the CERB, and other, where the time available to us varies. But at the CRA, we believe that we'll be able to continue these verifications after 3 or 4 years, if necessary. So we don't feel that the timeline is limited. There is not a legislative restriction. Thank you, Mr. Hamilton.
For 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'd like to begin with a quote. When the Canadian Emergency Wage Subsidy was first introduced, the urgent priority of the government was to assist the economy in an extremely volatile period at the onset of COVID-19, where both the future of many businesses and the Canadians they employed was in question. That was from this morning by Commissioner Hamilton of the CRA. The Canadian Emergency Wage Subsidy has in fact been used by companies to attack their workers in the middle of a labor dispute. This is most evident in my community here in Edmonton, where a large corporation known as Sesco, a manufacturing company, received the wage subsidy while they also locked out their 40-year-long time employees who are Boilermakers who are fighting for a fair contract. Because of how poorly this program was designed, Sesco's management was able to actually use the Canadian Emergency Wage Subsidy to hire replacement or scab workers at the expense of the company's over 40-year-long employees, locking them out. So my question is to the Auditor General. Do you think there was, quote, value for money, end quote, in allowing the Canadian Emergency Wage Subsidy to subsidize replacement labor, to undermine locked out workers at Sesco exercising the right for a fair deal?
So unfortunately, I can't comment on what the wage subsidy was used for by businesses. The wage subsidy program and the way it was designed did not discriminate against a business based on its size or its industry. Every employer was eligible if they saw a revenue decline. It is really through post-payment work that the government can verify that the wage subsidy was truly used to subsidize wages of workers, and that it truly went to businesses who were eligible.
Thank you very much. And now to the Commissioner of the CRA, do you believe that in your risk assessment that this is an important factor to consider when looking at some of the abuse of funds that I believe have taken place to force workers out of their workplace? And in your very own words, this was designed to actually help workers and the people that were employed. Do you think this is a good way to do that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I can't comment on specific case that you've raised, but I think what I would say is if we look at that case, we would have to see what does the legislation that was passed by Parliament say, and does it restrict that kind of thing or does it not? And then our role as administrator is to make sure that we implement it in a way that's consistent with the legislation. So without commenting on the specific case that you've raised, that would be our approach to looking at an issue and deciding whether it was something that we could do something about or should do something about, or whether it's something that is really just the legislation unfolding.
And thank you very much, Mr. Desjardins. You'll have one more opportunity for 2.5 minutes. I'm turning now to Mr. Chambers. You have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Hogan, how rare is it that a department does not fully accept Auditor General's finding?
I guess on paper, most departments usually say agree. In reality, I don't know. So
I know there's a back and forth. There's a draft report and there's a discussion.
Absolutely a back and forth, and we agree that the recommendation is one that can be implemented, and so on and so forth. And I think the concern here is we don't take issue with the risk-based approach that the department's made. It's really the amount of work, the extent of work, that we don't believe is sufficient in order to meet sort of that fairness threshold of treating every taxpayer, whether they be an individual or business, fairly. If you've identified a potential 100,000 businesses that are not complying, to only look at a fraction of those is not treating every taxpayer fairly. The first step is to identify payments to ineligible recipients. Then the decision can be made to go after collection or not collection. There can be all kinds of choices made for compassionate reasons and so on. But I just encourage the government to be a lot more transparent with what they're doing, and I think they need to do more work.
Thank you. And so, given there's a bit of a delta between or some discussion about the amount, are you planning to follow up with the CRA at the end of their post-payment verification to see whether you're satisfied with the work and the methodology that they use?
So, I mean, what work we plan on doing in the next coming years, I think, will depend on the results of some of their post-payment work, because that is truly the only way to know whether businesses or individuals were ineligible.
Thank you. And Commissioner Hamilton, given there's the discussion and some discrepancies, will the CRA commit to producing for this committee the results of its post-payment verification work? How much you've identified, the ineligible recipients, what the error rate you believe to be the error rate is? Is that work that you'll produce for this committee?
Mr. Chair, yes, we would. And I think we've been pretty transparent thus far with our progress reports, early days, but I think we would continue that pattern of reporting back on this area, and frankly, for now, but also for the future, because, if this ever happened again or something similar, it'd be nice for people to be able to learn from what we've gone through. And I wouldn't over-exaggerate or partially disagree between, we always learn something when the Auditor General comes in and pushes it maybe a different place, and and maybe the Auditor General learns something. I don't know. I don't want to speak for them, but it's not black and white. There's a question of degree, and I think we are doing some things a little bit more aggressively as a result of the Auditor General's report. But I'm comfortable where we are.
Fair enough. Final question, Ms. Hogan. The amount of $27 billion or 32, however you'd like to cut it, would you say that's the minimum amount that you feel the highest confidence in that ought to be investigated?
I think it's important to distinguish the amounts. There is $4.6 billion that were overpayments to individuals. distinguishing it from the $27.4 billion that require further investigation. In our work, we always try to take the most favorable approach to a taxpayer. So if you know, for example, with an individual, if they had earned $5,000 over 2 years, we said, well, you were eligible, when it's really only over 1 year. So we always gave the benefit of the doubt, which is why we landed on at least $27.4 billion. That requires investigation. There are individuals and businesses in there that are eligible for this, but you don't know until you've done the work to identify.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chair, my remaining minute, I'd like to do a little math. $32 billion of the wage subsidy and the CEWS have been identified as potentially going to ineligible recipients. Now, that doesn't include money that went to eligible recipients that many would deem unworthy. $6 to $7 billion to publicly traded corporations that continued to pay dividends to shareholders, and about $10 billion paid to students to not work when the economy opened up in the summer of 21. So if you add those two amounts together, we're talking about almost $50 billion, somewhere between, say, 40 and 50 billion of the largest benefits that went to Canadians for COVID. That could be anywhere between 20 to 25%. And so that's why this is an important discussion to have. That's why I think, Canadians deserve follow-up information from the Canada Revenue Agency. I thank the Auditor General for her work and her office's report on this. I thank the CRA for attending today and look forward to a future
Mr. Chambers.
discussion.
You'll actually have another round if you stop talking, so I'm going to turn over to Mrs. Yep. Ms. Bradford. Pardon me. I'm getting my colleagues on my right mixed up. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
And thank you to our witnesses today from both the Auditor General's Office and the CRA. So this far out from the onset of the COVID pandemic, I think, 2.5 years out, it's easy to forget what a time of great uncertainty that was for Canadians. It was a very stressful time. And I think as we look at these things now, it's important to keep that in mind, that this was really a bit of a crisis economically, or it could have been much worse. So I just wanted to put that perspective. There has been a lot of reference in previous questioning about the prepayment verification process. So I was wondering, Commissioner Hamilton, if you could perhaps elaborate on that, because there was both the automatic and manual process. What was involved in that prepayment process?
Thank you, Chair, for the question. And I'll ask one of my colleagues to elaborate a bit on what I'm going to say. But I would just mention that on the prepayment side, now this is the wage subsidy here that we're talking about, so I would distinguish it from the CERB. We had people that are sort of very familiar with corporate tax filings and the corporate tax community, small businesses, look at the applications or as they came in, and we did like a 100% review of them. A lot went through because nothing looked too bad at the first run. But then, as we did kick out some that then those experts looked at and said, well, I don't know, does this payroll number match up with what we've seen? And so we did that. So that's in the nature of prepayment controls. I would just add, because it gets lost, in the prepayment side, we also communicated with taxpayers. And I said, put a calculator out. And that's, a little bit like the software for people who do their taxes. It eliminates a lot of errors and mistakes. And so we found that was helpful. I know the business community found it. But let me turn, I guess, either to Kathy or Mark to just elaborate if there's more to be said about that prepayment, which again, I'm talking about the wage subsidy here, not some of the other programs.
I would just say it was, I think the commissioners covered the most important parts of this, but just to reiterate, 100% of all the applications that were received for the wage subsidy were automatically reviewed. for risk indicators. So we looked at things like reasonability of the number of employees and the remuneration that was being claimed based on T4 filings that we had for the entity. We looked at some of our lists of high risk taxpayers as potential flags, as an example. And we also had a monetary threshold. So if the claim was over a certain dollar amount, it was automatically reviewed, sent for manual review. And that was the second part of the prepayment control process we had in place, the manual review, where we had our officers looking at the files, considering past compliance history, considering information that we had on file, considering the GST data as well at that phase of the process. And when necessary, they could communicate with the claimant, obtain additional information to allow them to determine if they were eligible and if the amounts were accurate. So it was an opportunity, again, to review. About $33 billion out of the $100 billion that was paid out in the wage subsidy was manually reviewed by the agency.
So it certainly wasn't an attestation process. There was a process that went through a review.
I would say the attestation process was the first part.
Right.
So the first step, as part of the application, in addition to providing the information that was required, the claimant had to attest that that they were eligible and that the information was accurate.
But
that was the first step.
It wasn't just granted on
No,
that
then it went
basis,
through the
period.
automated reviews, and where appropriate, where risk was identified, it went through manual review as well.
Okay, great. Thank you for that clarification. And what percentage of Qs went to small businesses as opposed to larger corporations? Can someone give us some idea?
Mr. Chair, I don't have the figures right in front of me, but I know that they are in the Auditor General's report, so she may be able to beat me to the punch on this one.
Absolutely. I'd point you to page, gosh, I don't have my glasses on, page 80 in the report, the exhibit 10.F6 will show you the percentage of subsidy paid to businesses based on size, based on number of employees.
So in the interest of time, because I don't want to take time looking it up now, can you just give us that figure for the record?
And the figure of how many went to small businesses?
Yeah.
What
like-
would you deem small business, less than 500 employees?
Yeah, well, yes, I guess.
I would tell you real quickly, if my math works, it's about 20 some odd percent.
And that is the time. Thank you very much. We have our next round, full round.
Yeah.
Turning to Kelly, Mr. McCauley, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thanks, Chair. The CRA, previously you were just talking about the risk indicators when we're doing the applications. I just want to get back to, is a high risk of insolvency one of the risk indicators that CRA used?
Mr. Chair, I'll ask Kathy to elaborate on that, but I don't think that the financial condition of the company was a consideration.
fine.
Sure.
It doesn't say-
Just hold on. And just so everyone knows, we're all on the clock now. So when your time's
no.
up, your time's up. So, okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
actually, no, I'm fine. I think I have the answer there. But did the CRA recognize that would be a risk issue? Did they push that forward to finance, or the discussion group saying we shouldn't make the subsidy available to people that owe billions to the government of Canada because it's a high-risk indicator of insolvency?
Mr. Chair, so I keep getting pushed to talk about what recommendations we might have made within the confines of discussions, and so I'm not going to go there.
Can I ask
but
why?
suffice to say that we were part of the discussions, and as we saw things, we took note of them. And you're right. If a company looks like it's going to be insolvent, that makes the prospect of collection, should there be a problem, riskier.
And throwing good money after bad. Do we know how much money went to these companies? And also how much went to them, and how many of them actually are still solvent right now? And how much do these companies still owe the government of Canada? If you
Mr.
don't know,
Chair,
you can get back to us maybe?
Yeah, and I guess we may need to go back and forth about exactly which companies you're talking about at risk of being going insolvent.
The ones that that haven't remitted their GST, HST, or owe the government of Canada in arrears.
Yeah. maybe all I would say is how one judges whether a company's about to go insolvent or is that's a judgment call in terms of where it's at. I don't have that number here with me. We can go back and see if we can construct. But again, I think it's going to be loose. How do you determine this company's looks like it's going to go insolvent? That's a judgment. And then how many of them actually went? We may be able to get some figures on that.
It doesn't look like we're coming to a solution today between the AG's recommendations and the CRA's agreement. Let me ask you, the minister intimated that the AG's report, how much went to ineligible companies was politically motivated. Do you agree with that?
Mr. Chair, I don't have a view on that about what's politically motivated or what isn't. But just to your comment, I would say the reason why there might still be a difference of opinion, and it might not even be just between the AG and ourselves, it could be between two other reasonable people, is we're pretty early in the process. There's a lot of work that needs to get done and that we are doing. And probably down the road, we'll see those differences.
If we're early in the process, how many months into the process? Like, is it 6 months? Is it 1 year before you feel comfortable we'll have a much better idea?
Well, that's Mr. Chair, that's probably a better question for Kathy. But I mean, we are into the process, right? Don't forget, we started October 2020.
You've stated repeatedly we're too early into the process.
Yep.
When will we have a better idea? Like 6 months from now, 1 year from now, 2 years? I just don't know. I'm not being.
No.
I'm just trying to get a better idea then.
Fair enough. I would say, so we're into phase 2 now of our audit, so we've done some, we're completing them. We know we're going to be in this till 2025. So I would say, well, Kathy's probably going to kick me, but I would say probably by the end of the year, we will have a much better sense of whether we're getting on top of most of it or whether we need to do some further work. I don't know, Kathy, if that would be.
No, that's a fair answer. Just ballpark-ish is fine for me. How much time, Mr. Chair?
You have 1 minute.
Great. A.G. Hogan, part of your report, 10.45, you stated, the report states, we cannot determine the number of employees who benefited from this program, whether employees remain working for the same company, whether those laid off were rehired. Like, it's over $100 billion of taxpayers' dollars. It's like, how is it that we don't have this information? How do we not know this? I recognize at the very beginning of COVID, stuff had to be done immediately, but like 6 months in, 1 year in, we still seem to be operating of, well, let's just get money out the door, as opposed to, again, I use the word fencing, but putting up better fencing to protect taxpayers.
Well, one of the requirements in the legislation when it asked us to do this audit was to conclude on whether or not the programs met their intended objectives. And when it comes to the wage subsidy, some of those objectives included helping the employer retain their employees throughout the pandemic, rehiring employees who had potentially been laid off as businesses closed, but also seeing businesses be sustained throughout the pandemic. Because of the lack of information gathered about employees, so not having SIN numbers is why we're unable to conclude whether or not the same employees are working or remained. And we do know from the Statistics Canada information that while the number of businesses stayed the same or went up, they are different businesses in some industries. And so we were unable to conclude on meeting the intended objectives of CEWS because of the limited information gathered.
And thank you very much. Mr. Fragaskatos, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. In fact, I will be splitting my time with Ms. Bradford, who will go first.
Oh, very good.
Thank you, Mr. Fragaskatos. So very quickly, Commissioner Hamilton, in the audits that you've completed as of January the 3rd, 94.2% of the amounts reviewed have been allowed, and the CRA has denied or adjusted 5.8% of the dollar value of these claims. How does that compare with the usual compliance rates?
Mr. Chair, again, I'll defer to my colleague to elaborate and make that comparison. I would say it's not very different from what we would have expected, but in terms of our normal experiences, it's probably a bit higher. But I'm going to let Kathy or Mark take that.
I think it's hard to compare this particular program with other compliance programs we run, and we have such a wide variety of programs. The error rate or change rate or reassessment rate really depends on the nature of the taxpayer, the nature of the tax issues we're looking at. It's very hard to draw a comparison, and I have to say this particular program was quite unique, and it's one of the reasons why we wanted to start our audits so quickly, so that we could better understand what the risks were. Because it was quite unusual for the CRA to be starting an audit before the end of a tax year, before a tax return had been filed. So I think it's very difficult to draw comparisons with our regular audit programs.
You didn't take any time at all. No problem. This goes to Ms. Hawara, actually, as well. In the report, Ms. Hawara, the Auditor General does make clear that on its own, post-payment verification is completely in line of the type that is being pursued by the CRA. That decision on its own, leave aside the specifics as far as how it's going and the various mechanics, the policy design, this type of thing. But on its own, that is completely in line with international best practices that are in place and recognized on how verification ought to proceed in emergencies. My question for you stems from the very detailed explanation that you've outlined here today and that the Commissioner has as well as far as verification and how it is being carried out. To what extent is that particular approach in line with international best practices from an audit perspective?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. I think the comments in the report or the findings in the report tied the need for post-payment compliance work given the attestation or the attestation-based approach that was taken. So certainly that is our view as well, that a post-payment compliance program was going to be needed, and that's what we're working on now. So we agree this was the right approach in terms of making sure that we could ensure the integrity of the program, both with prepayment controls, which we feel were appropriate in the case of the wage subsidy, and the post-payment audit program that's currently underway.
What we've also had emphasized here today is that, unlike CERB, attestation, while it may have played a minimal role in the wage subsidy, this was not an attestation-based model. The policy design here was quite different, with verification built in from the beginning. My question relates to the whole approach when it comes to verification and where things are going as far as the assessment of risk, how you take that into account, and if you could also take a moment, because I'm running out on time, to clarify a few things. Different topic, but the dental benefit, for example, or the housing benefit. Yes, there is an attestation-based approach here, but there are verification processes built in to check. There's a number of things that people are asked beforehand. There's post-verification that can take place. Could you touch on that as well? So two questions there built into one.
Mr. Chair, maybe I'll take the second question. And I'm going to have to remind me of the first one. But the second question on the dental and the housing benefit, I would say there's more prepayment verification in the dental and the housing, partially because of what we learned through the CERB. And what we have with those programs is we have actual tax filings from people. If you recall, in the CERB situation, it was a rolling, amount. If you earned a certain amount, $5,000 over 12 months, but we didn't have tax filing information at that time. This time we do, and it's linked through to the Canada Child Benefit, again, information we have. So we have more information. It's a little bit closer to the kind of regular program that we would run, but it is attestation-based.
And thank you very much. You'll have to come back for the first part of that question. Turning now to Madame Saint-Clair Desgagne.
Ms. Saint-Clair Desgagne, you have the floor for 2.5 minutes. Thank you. Given that this is the last chance I have to speak, I think it's very important for Quebecers and Canadians to hear from the mouth of the Auditor General the importance that a more rigorous job based on data be implemented so that the CRA's fiscal responsibility towards Quebecers and Canadians be maintained. I think this is a very important question, and I'd also like to mention I'd like you to be able to say that you have not been biased, that you're doing the work you need to do, and I'd like to thank you for all the work you do. You have a minute and a half. Answer. I'll respond to your question in two respects. First of all, I'd like to talk about the recommendations that are truly recommendations to improve the future, going forward, improve not only any approach to the next pandemic, but also to improve the fiscal system of the country. Real-time payroll data and real-time business income data are required. That is what we recommend, and the CRA agrees. As Commissioner Hamilton says, this is what we want. This would truly help with different benefits, not just the ones we're discussing today. As for post-payment audits that could be more rigorous, I'd suggest that you not only look at the numbers, the amounts of paid to businesses and individuals that were not eligible, but also to look at the error percentage, the error rate. Approximately 2 out of every 3 files have a problem. This indicates that much work remains to be done and that our tax system, under law, requires that every taxpayer be treated fairly. And in my opinion, this requires a lot more work. We need to not only examine the numbers, but ensure that every taxpayer has been treated fairly. Thank you very much.
Minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank all the witnesses for being present with us again today and for being able to answer so many of our questions. And for my final round, I do want to just mention and reiterate how important this work is on behalf of Canadians. Canadians are good people. They show up to work and they pay their taxes, and they hope when they pay their taxes that that money goes to helping their neighbors, particularly in a time of need. But when huge sums of taxpayer dollars are sent to profitable, publicly traded companies, they're rightfully concerned. And I'm sure, and I'd hope, the Commissioner, you'd agree. So on behalf of Canadians, what percentage of the wage subsidy went to publicly traded companies that made profits during the pandemic?
Mr. Chair, I would have to get back to the committee with those statistics,
Please.
And I'm happy to do so. I don't
Noted.
have them at
Thank
my
you very
fingertips.
much.
In addition to that information, it'd be valuable, I think, to Canadians to know how much money went to companies that, or how much went to companies that paid executive bonuses. Do you have that number with you?
Mr. Chair, no, I do not have it with me. So again, I can go back and we can send that to the committee afterwards.
Please. I do believe it's valuable information. Canadians deserve to know where their taxpayer dollars go. They deserve to know which companies have taken this support, and they deserve to know exactly which ones profited. I think that's our fair questions, and I'd be happy to see that report. Now to the Auditor General, what would the fiscal impact be of requiring that money to be repaid?
I'm not sure I could predict what that fiscal impact would be. It would depend on the ability to collect payments, right? I think the first question is identifying how much was paid to ineligible recipients, whether they be individuals or businesses, and then making a decision on efforts to collect or collection at all. Those are decisions that the government should make. But the first step is to identify those that are ineligible before you make a decision otherwise.
And my final question to the CRA, in relation to the limited capacity, which there's only so many investigations you can conduct. I understand that, and your partial agreement to that recommendation. But given the fact that there are some offenders that are benefiting disproportionately larger sums of taxpayer dollar to their publicly traded corporations, wouldn't it be valuable and important to ensure that we investigate those first and to ensure that Canadians get their value retained?
And a brief answer, Mr. Hamilton. Thank you.
I think you can rest assured that at the CRA we do identify large corporations, medium, small corporations who have got money that they're not eligible for. And that would apply to this program, that would apply to the income tax, to GST. So yes, we do believe that it's our duty to Canadians to have a fair compliance regime that tries to distribute the tax burden fairly and to make sure that people are not getting money that they're not eligible for.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chambers, you have the floor for 5 more minutes, and then I'm turning to Ms. Shanahan for the final 5. Over to you.
I'll yield my time to the committee or one of my colleagues if they have more questions, but I'm done, Mr. Chair.
Your colleague, Mr. Williams, any questions?
Sure. I'll just take a couple seconds and we'll go to Ms. Shanahan. Actually, I just want to follow up on one of Ms. Shanahan's comments just about tracking, like using the SIN numbers. And I think your words, you were talking about the amount of resources needed to better track some of the information. Real time. Yeah, is that a possible, or is that like such a significant investment? It's something for further down the road, or is it possible with our current resources, or a real fantasy wish at this time?
Sorry, I'm just between the two. Yes. I'm not sure I'm tracing together the actual question.
I think we were talking about real. Go ahead, Ms. Shanahan.
It looks like my colleague got it. So. Yeah.
I think the question was about the ability for the government to have access to real-time data.
Yes.
Either in the form of e-invoicing or e-payroll, and there were 2 recommendations from the Auditor General in that regard. So there's a significant amount of work underway, as the Commissioner mentioned earlier, certainly on e-payroll, and commitments have been made in that regard. We're still a ways away, as I understand it, and same for e-invoicing. We are currently examining the options for Canada to adopt an e-invoicing solution, but it's quite a significant undertaking. And it's an area where we're learning from what other countries are doing. And as part of our action plan, we will report back to this committee, and we will report back on our findings of the studies we're doing now.
Okay. Yeah, please. And I apologize. I'd mixed up with the previous question I had about the social insurance numbers. I will follow up on that, though. But go ahead, Mr. Hamilton.
Yeah, just to add and reinforce what Kathy said now that I understand the question. Yeah, both on e-payroll. E-payroll is something, real-time payroll data, that we are working on. The government has made a commitment. We're in the process of building a business case. But I would say, to your point, those are big structural changes within the systems. So they're not going to happen in a year or 2. They're going to take time. But we have started the work on that. We've made a commitment to go. So that's on the e-payroll side. But there are advantages to it. There's advantages beyond the CRA, advantages for records of employment and other data that gets used. But we do have to consult with businesses and think about the structural changes. On the e-invoicing side, again, that's something that different countries use to get real-time invoicing data, and we see that as quite attractive. It also has big issues that need to be resolved systemically and with partners and consultation, but we're a little less advanced on that, but we're still pursuing that as well, and then it will come to what's the capacity at the CRA to do these big structural changes together. So that's something we'll have to come to grips with.
Okay. How many people, just last quick couple questions, how many people are actually working on the post-payment verification? I think you have 57,000 some odd employees. And is this taking away from other audits?
The post-payment verification for the
CEWS,
queues, and we received resources when the programs were implemented to have auditors and to do the compliance work. So it's not necessarily taking away, but at the end of the day, yeah, probably a little bit at the margin. In terms of the numbers of people, I may have to get back to you with that. Yeah, we'll get back to you on exactly how many we have in the compliance space, and it would I don't know if we'd be able to distinguish between the wage subsidy and the other benefits, but if we can, we will.
Sure, or you can just lump them all into for the other benefits as well. That's fine. Thanks for your time, AG Hogan. Thanks always for your time as well and your team. Appreciate it. Thanks, Ms. Shanahan, for clarifying my question.
Thank you. Just one quick question. Clarification, Mr. Hamilton. For the reports you're going to provide for the verification recovery efforts, can those be provided kind of quarterly to the committee?
I mean, I guess in theory, yes. I guess the only question I'm asking myself as you ask the question is, are quarterly reports, is enough going to happen in a quarter to justify another report, or would we be better having a different time frame? So if you like, maybe I could certainly get back to the committee on...
Yeah, or if you like, we might come back to you if you kind of give us the cut you're going to, I might come back to you and ask for the quarterly numbers if there's questions around it. How does that sound?
Yeah, because you may want quarterly, whether I think it's a good idea or not.
Sounds good. Thank you. Ms. Shanahan, you have the floor for the last 5 minutes, please.
Chair, and I, for one, am feeling very reassured, having learned that much more about both the pre and the post verification work, and the compliance trend that was observed in the December 2nd progress report. And I'm looking forward to hearing more, real results in that regard. But apparently, there in that report, there was the identification of about 2,000 high-risk files relating to CEWS or Qs, depending if you do a hard or soft C, preparers. Can you tell us more about this work and how you plan to tackle this problem? I think we know what we're talking about. When any program comes out, there's always a few operators, right, who figure out how to work the system.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. We did find a pocket of more serious non-compliance in the course of our audit work. So these are claims that have been made where we believe they were false or contained inaccurate information, and that the claimants were actually assisted in making those claims by a third party. We would call them a preparer, for example. So we are pursuing all of those cases. The December report uses the figure 2,000. We're up to 3,800. So as we are discovering more, we are identifying them, and we will be auditing all of those claims. We will also be auditing the preparers who supported the claimants and considering the application of third-party penalties. So this is an area that we are concerned about, and we will be continuing our work in that regard.
Very interesting. So you were able to identify a further 1,800, so 3,800, and it's always handy to have that list close by, right, for future projects. So you mentioned penalties. My understanding is that there's over 11 million in penalties that have been applied against ineligible recipients. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, how that's done, and is there criminal action that's taken in these cases?
So there are, so we do have the ability under the Income Tax Act to apply penalties in the context of the wage subsidy program. The penalties that you mentioned were applied against the claimants themselves, so these are gross negligence penalties that we applied. There are a number of penalties, but the other ones we are going to be pursuing are the third-party penalties, which I just mentioned before. So we will be looking at both the claimants and the individuals who supported the claimants in making those false claims. In terms of criminal investigations, which was the second part of your question, there is the ability on the part of the agency to pursue criminal investigations where we believe criminal activity has taken place in the context of the wage subsidy. So if there has been fraud, and our auditors are able to refer cases to our criminal investigations program, and there are some investigations underway.
So it's safe to say that the agency commissioner, Ms. Hawara, takes this very seriously and pursues every avenue for anyone that's committed fraud against the agency. Commissioner?
Yes, I can say that definitively. And, you know, even though earlier on I talked about education, compliance, sensitivity to taxpayers and the situation, when we see something that's wrong, we go after it. And we have to have that ability for strong enforcement in cases like Kathy has raised and even criminal investigations. So, you know, there's a spectrum out there of the kinds of things we do in the compliance world, but definitely, as with all parts of the tax system, we need to have that strong enforcement in cases where people are doing things inappropriately and, in this case, fraudulently, potentially.
Well, thank you. That's very reassuring indeed. One last question. What is a public-facing CEWS registry?
I'll go first, and Kathy may correct me. So, as part of the legislation for the wage subsidy, the government committed to putting a registry out publicly that says who got the wage subsidy, and so we were in charge of putting that together, that list, and it was on the website. I assume it's still up there. I don't know now, but it tells you who received the wage subsidy. And that was just part of the transparency for this program.
And that's fully available. It was fully available from the beginning of the program and is still there today?
It probably was available. It took us a bit of time to get it, but yes, essentially from the beginning of the program. And what I'm not sure is if it's still available today.
So because the application period has closed for the CEWS, in May of 2022, we stopped updating the registry. However, it is still available to be consulted. So it's sort of a snapshot in time. And so the information is still available. It's just no longer updated because primarily the program is no longer available.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, just is it available publicly online, or would we have to request? It is, so we can find it online. Thank you. If we have trouble finding that, I might reach out for a copy. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate everyone coming in today, and thank you very much. And I will adjourn the meeting.